Hello, welcome to another episode of the Inforunners podcast. Today we're talking about bridging the ship gap. I'm Haze, and above us we have...
I'm Execute, and to my left, right, sorry.
We have Algared, who's going to learn to use push to talk.
Sorry, and Algared. I've got to remember to press the push to talk button. That's right.
All right. Today's episode we're going to be focusing on the idea that there's a ship gap in the progression of profession ships, because currently there's this massive black hole with regards to ship progression when you go from small industry ships and jumping up to large capital ships. These ships are going to be vital, the ones that go in between the small to the large capital, in order to have players progress up economically from the base ships until they plan to focus for the next step when they plan to focus on the economy.
Yeah, and this is an important aspect because Star Citizen is not your normal MMO. In a normal MMO, you level up your character. Your character becomes better at the skills. But in Star Citizen, it's actually the ship that's actually going to give you the tools and abilities to actually perform the things you want to do at a higher standard, more efficiently, more economically. And so getting these right means it's like getting the profession or the character tree ready for the different professions in other MMO games. And so that's why we think it's important. And so, yeah.
Yeah, you could sort of describe it as if you give an example of sort of a prospector, and then you want to save up to your end game goal of an Orion, you're going to need, there's this big gaping black hole. We're talking about there needs to be little stepping stones in between that go across the abyss of this black hole that you can use as stepping stones in order to get to your goal.
Yeah. So one of the things we thought we'd do today is look at the areas where we think we've got fairly complete progression trees in terms of the professions that CIG have indicated and the roles they see within those professions. And then look at the ones we see are really glaring, where there seem to be great holes all over the place. And then we'll finish off by looking at the other professions and saying, hey, this is where we think there could be potential holes. So, yeah.
I guess starting us off, we give those examples. I guess we'll start with Cargo Execute. You want to take it away?
Yeah, so I guess cargo is really filled out as opposed to other professions, but there are a few others that are filled out as well. So you've got everything right through your whole series, obviously, that fills right through. Almost every ship in the game's got some version of cargo or freight, and you also go all the way up to your capital ships like your Banu Merchant, man.
Yeah, it's pretty well covered. I mean, whether you're starter ship or you're talking about cargo specific or cargo niche, there's something for everyone there. Don't need any more cargo ships, I'd say.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another example would be military ships, where we have these out the wazoo. And I think we all can safely say there's going to be more ships coming. And even though we call them military or fighters or whatever you want to call them, there's a very broad range of combat in this game. And I still expect that we'll see more that we haven't seen yet.
The thing is, I don't think we need any more military ships. Whether you start with a Gladius and you move up to a Javelin, there's a ship in every bit to bridge that progression up as you become more wealthy. And
I was just going to say it's definitely not needed for the start of the game. It's definitely filled out. We have other professions that need to be filled out for the start of the game.
Yeah, you might want more ships in each of those roles to kind of flesh it out more, but there's at least something in each of those roles and at each step of the way. And that's really what we're looking at, where it seems there's nothing or this gaping hole.
I think there's nothing that can stop them from putting out another Aegis combat ship there.
Yeah, anything but Aegis, please.
Yes.
It is the military, Aegis and Anvil are the military manufacturers. You're going to see more ships from them fighting combat-wise than anyone else. It's just how it is.
But there's a third area or role we think is fairly fleshed out, and that's actually refueling. Now, I actually still think there are a couple of vague holes here, but in general, it's got the stepping stones. And if you look at the 100i and the Freelancer Duo, you've got nebula riding. These guys can hey, ride the nebulas, cowabunga, dude, and all that stuff, and just keep
I
going.
love that idea. The idea that you could the nebula stretch from one side of a system to another, and you can literally like riding a wave all the way to the other side because it's a free ride.
Yeah, you
Because
just
it's
process that fuel and just keep
Yeah.
going. You know.
yeah.
I don't know the guy's name, but you know that really small turtle in Finding Nemo, and the old turtle. Yeah, you need to name your ship after that small.
100
turtle.
eyes, a little guy,
Yeah,
and the freelance, it's a turtle.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
But expand on refueling a little bit more. I mean, like they've got the small Vulcan, and that's like a small starter refueler. Like it doesn't collect it, but it can refuel. Then you look at the Starfarer. I know that's a bit of a jump from 30 meters to 100 meters, but that's fairly decent. And then you say, oh, well, what about the end game? Hull D and Hull E's in the lore have been talked about as refueling ships for the military, where they literally have refueling stations on the back of those that tap into the supplies, and they rearm and refuel, and they on a large scale. Those are the large scale refuelers. So going from smaller little refueling to larger ones, it's complete enough for the end game to function as well as people sort of return.
I think
And I've got to admit, when
sorry, I was just going to say it's probably best that we kind of go the way we've kind of gone with this guide is for the start of the game. There's definitely more progression, limited progression. Yeah, but I think we're going to try to keep it concise to the start of the game. Anyway, Algared, you were going to say, sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, one of the things that actually made me more willing or more happy to see refueling as complete was, saying, okay, the Hull Ds and Hull E's are in lore as being refueling ships. Whereas if you take those out, it does feel like there's only the two, but when you've actually add them in, you've actually got quite a long way to go.
It's a bit much for a Starfarer to refuel just an entire javelin and then say that's what I'm done. I have to get someone else. When you see that there are the bigger refuelers that can fuel those extra large capitals. I mean, how many Starfarers you need to refuel a Bengal?
Yeah, that's probably the big thing.
And just also remember, guys, too, with the fuel, that can be a cargo. So any cargo ship can be a refueler in a roundabout weird way by carrying the fuel. I don't know how you're going to get it from a cargo container of fuel into the actual ship, but if any ship can carry there you go, something like that. Any ship that can carry the liquid cargo, be laughing.
Anyway, we move on to the examples where we have a ship progression tree is glaring incomplete, the big black hole that we've been talking about. So I'd like to start on the biggest of the ones that we have selected, and that's mining.
Yeah, and you've already talked about it slightly in the intro. At the moment, all we've got is the cute little Prospector and the Orion. Now, that may have been okay 6 months ago or at Christmas, but once they told us that the Orion has grown to 340 meters, no, but 340 meters, doubled in size. You've got a 24-meter ship and a 340-meter ship, and nothing in between.
It's like you jump and leap off into space, and there's a big void that you get sucked in. It's just you can't make the jump.
Yeah. And so that seems that there really does need to be at least two ships. I reckon I wouldn't mind. I reckon there need to be a 100-meter ship and a 200-meter ship somewhere in that line to give you that progression jump. But
either a 50 or 60-meter ship as well.
There's a few options
jump from Prospector to 100-meter. That's big.
Yep.
Yeah, you could have one step in there. You could have three. It depends again how they go about it. And we'll speak
but
about
there definitely does need to be something in there to give you that progression. Otherwise,
can you imagine a poor guy with his Prospector saving every penny so he can one day afford that a big Orion? It's ridiculous. He needs something to step up onto, so from a higher position he can earn more and have a better chance of getting to that Orion, as opposed to one of those dreams like eventually 10 years later I'll afford the Orion.
Yeah, and I suppose it's think of it in other terms, like he's with his mates. His mate's the military jock, and his mate's going through progression of military ships and building up. And I'm taking out my new Saber Raven. Oh, Saber Raven! Wow, where's that put you? Oh, it put me up here. What are you taking it? I'm taking out the Prospector again.
And then he moves up to the Vanguard, and then he buys and then he's thinking, I'm still on the Prospector.
I've only got 100,000 credits to go.
Yeah. It's a bit obvious when you lay it out like that. There's definitely some super glaring gaps. One of the other ones is salvage. We know that the Vulture or the Drake Starter is coming, and they've hinted that that's going to be a salvaging ship. So again, there's a giant gap between this Vulture and the Reclaimer, and obviously there's room for another 1, 2, 3, or whatever in the middle there as well.
Salvage have the same problem as mining. There's really only 2 ships. In fact, salvage is even worse at the moment because while we know the Vulture's coming, or we've been told the Vulture's coming,
it's not
even here yet.
Yeah, we've only got
not
the one
concepted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, and then the last one that we've got there that you guys have put in is utility.
Yeah, utility is an interesting sort of one because you've got repair, and you've also got sort of a, let's say, transportation repair. Like, look at the Crucible. It does major repairs, but it also is allowed to transfer small craft as in its garage. So, like, say, that's really useful because you can take a completely dead craft that can't get away and take it home or repair it or move it. Like, if you wanted to move a Nova tank from one planet to the next, what are you going to use? Crucible is the smallest sort of vehicle purpose-built to start moving land assets, whether that's mining equipment to Nova tanks or ground-based vehicles. So the idea of utility supports repair, rearming, and relocation. And the thing is, there's nothing in between. We've got the Crucible in itself is a very early concept ship. It's one of the early waves. The size that it is now is literally going to have to double in size in order to be what it is. It's going to be a true capital in every sense, because
there are a lot of ships that have come out between when that was announced and now, and the one I think of drastically, and you probably can, both of you could probably think of another one that I haven't. The one I'm thinking of is the Eclipse. That's a very wide ship. Can you guys think
bomber.
of the bomb? Sorry, which bomber? Sorry. Oh, you mean the Eclipse bomber, right? So I thought you meant the some other bomber for a second there.
While that's true, while there are other single pilot ships that have come out since then, they could say, well, the Crucible was only ever made to be able to carry a Hornet, which is what it was originally said to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
But even on that, because the Hornet has grown over time, and the metrics have changed on that, that's going to force the Crucible to grow. But
you look at half of the space of the Crucible was put to a cockpit up the top with no room down below for engineering, crew quarters, and anything else the ship needs. It's like,
and so as you put in all the bits and pieces it's going to need just to fit them in, it'll have to grow.
Yeah. I'd even speculate, and this is a total speculation, I was going to say, right? I wouldn't be surprised if that thing was able to hold at the end of the day, to hold a freelancer inside it. Like, when you're thinking about all the ships and all the different sizes and thinking how wide an Eclipse is and stuff like that. That's the type of thing I'm possibly expecting. Something a bit larger. Constellation obviously becomes too big, but we do have a gap at the moment in size, in my book, really between the Freelancer and the Constellation. Constellation, that kind of coming back around a bit, the size of the ships that I think are missing the most are really that Caterpillar Constellation size, but there is a much large glaring degree in physical size as well as
look
roll.
Just at the Carrack, right? It grew to about 150 meters something. I would expect the Crucible to also grow to that size just to accommodate what it needs to have.
And you got to also remember, like the Crucible, even if it does grow, the garage section doesn't need the way they build it doesn't need to be able to take the ship wholly inside. If a ship's too big, you just leave it open and kind of park it in there and use it as an open workshop. So there are ways around it, but even with that, the Crucible versus Vanguard, Vulcan, is just such a huge gap. Then we kind of see there's got to be something in between to give that progression for the step.
The other thing that the Vulcan is so much more roadside-based vehicle. It's like jerry can fill up your thing, only barely able to go very light repairs. Like it can do hull repairs and component replacements. It's not a true.
It does your battery jumper lead type.
If your engine's dead, it's not going to be able to fix that unless it gets a replacement part.
I know you're giving a fuel reference, but that's the Starfarer to the Vulcan,
No,
not the
we're
but
talking about
yeah,
repairs, you know.
yeah. It's kind of like going from a jerry can to a cargo tanker. There's no real.
The jumper leads from the roadside assist to the
Yes.
new having a new engine block placed.
Yeah, there's room for a ship that can make the middle ground. In other words, it's not the complete repair of a larger capital ship. It's able to repair something that's heavily damaged like a Constellation and get it good enough that it can repair the actual systems, not just patch holes.
Yeah.
Which is what the Vulcan is basically. That's what it does.
Yeah, and in utility, we've also got the need. Well, we think there's a need for the ability to haul ships. Like it's been said that you'll be able to haul ships on hull E's in kind of a containers or in the hulls. We know that you could have ships being transported in your Endeavour cargo hangar bay. We know you could have ships being transported in your Idris or your Polaris.
But
or your
those are
Crucible.
not purpose-made ships for these sorts of things.
But
I mean, at the end of the day,
they're not ferries.
no.
And ideally what we need is that utility ship that's going to act as a ferry to take ships, to take bulk ships or move ships across systems or whatever.
Or even a ship that's seriously damaged and you need to relocate that. Or you have a big ship that's seriously damaged and you need to tow it to dock.
Yeah, and so you also need your tug ships. And while that might seem weird, if you look at if you use World War II as kind of a basis there and look at the German tanks, almost every German tank that came out after Panzer III had a recovery vehicle, which was basically the same vehicle, hooked with a crane and tow bars and plow, things. So when it was trying to tow the thing out, it didn't get yanked in. You had the Berg Tiger, you had the Berg Panther III, Panther IV, even a Berg Panther, and they were all made to be able to haul out the bigger vehicles, all the vehicles of their own class. And so it makes sense to have a utility vehicle that's a tug as well. And yet we don't have those yet.
No.
I think that I'm just going to say it always comes back to that my little theory I have that the way they're selling the ships is really tailored at making the most amount of money. And I think you're going to see your large ships first, which we've all seen. All the capitals are almost pretty much done. Lots of small ones, and then all the ones in the middle.
They did advertise one of those, the dreaded Drake Scout carrier ship. We won't go into the details of that, but the general idea of having a ship barge that does nothing more than take ships from A to B as a transport. That's one of those needed utility ships.
And the Starlifter too.
On the Starlifter, yeah. Those are
the idea of a Starlifter, a great idea.
It shows that CIG has been thinking about this. They have, said, we need this. We've identified this, but we still need them sooner than later, and probably for release. Because if ships ever become persistent and you can't move your persistent ships around when they are damaged, then you write an insurance claim every time your engine blows out.
Yeah, and there's your first quest. Go get my shit and bring it back to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to go through this next bit?
Yeah. So here we have a ship progression for professions. We're suggesting it's lacking in. But what size of ship do you think is needed in each line? How many stepping stones do we need in order to fix and pace this gap, so that there's enough sort of room for people to do those little bunny hop steps and move up in the world?
It's a tough one because people are going to have different opinions on it, and I also think this is an opinion thing because some people are going to want to really do that profession and they've really put the time and effort to think about it, and there's others who are like, I'm not interested in that. But yeah, it only needs one or whatever. But I think we can all agree the ones that we've looked at definitely need at least one more step in their progression.
As a bare minimum. And some of them could use 2 or 3.
As for the start of the game, they definitely all need at least one more.
Yes.
There is another way you could actually work at building up that progression tree, and that's by having the components. So better components, better blades, better attachments to a ship. But even at the end of the day, a Vulcan's not going to be able to harvest fuel like a Starfarer can. And so to go from your Vulcan to your Starfarer is really going to leave you in that gap. And that's what one we think is pretty much complete.
That's the other thing they'll try and do, Algared, given your example of the Vulcan, is they'll probably have ships. Now, this is way off in the future. A ship like the Vulcan, where it does two things, but not as well as the other. But there might be another ship that does two things, and it actually does, they might do one thing the same.
Yeah.
But this one might be like the Vulcan, where the Vulcans repair and refuel. This might be repair and towing.
Harvesting.
Or whatever,
Well, they did talk about towing they did think about at one point for the Crucible having a towing
originally it started out as a towing vehicle and then it changed. I remember reading that.
I think that they're still uncertain how they're going to make towing work, and that's why they're sort of edgy about not wanting to commit to anything. But they do realize that you need towing. It's just one of those things you just have to do. I mean, if every time a car broke down, we just left it on the side of the road and bought a new one, it's not really how society works.
It looked like Mad Max out there right now, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And,
go on.
But we do need these progression sort of jumps. And they need to be in before Star Citizen is in a playable state for release. We need it for those core progressions, because if you don't have those sort of jumps, goes up, people can't climb the ladder essentially. What you have when you jump up from a baby starter profession is not enough money to then go up to the endgame capital ship. You need those rungs of the ladder to be able to climb.
Yeah. Get those steps so you can actually get to the next, or get to your end game without grinding.
There's many ways you can look at it too. One other way I look at it very simply, giving your example of the Prospector, the Orion, you're going from 1 player to 8 players. I don't have enough fingers, but you get my point. Yeah, well, even more so. So the point is, you need your, maybe like I'm thinking halfway between 8 is 4, so you need at least a 4-player variant. So there's a little bit more pressure.
And if we use the mining as an example, here we've got a 24-meter ship. We've got a ship that was once 170 meters, now going to 340. Even if you were going one progression jump, the logic would seem to be, let's make that 170 meter ship that used to be the Orion and kind of make it a slightly less chunky, powerful version or something like that. But yeah, it does seem to be needed.
And one thing I will chuck in there too, the one last thing, and I guess we'll talk about this later when we start speculating about ships, is the manufacturer as well. Do you guys, I know this is a little bit off topic, but do you guys see that because there's a MISC ship and there's an RSI ship, that middle ship might be a MISC, it might be an RSI? Or do you think they simply must make it another manufacturer because it's been done already?
I don't think they need to make another manufacturer. The classic example really would be military ships. We have a plethora of Aegis and Anvil. And they just seem to make them because, hey, they're the military ships. So to use that same policy wouldn't be outside to say these companies are specialised in these areas. But you could equally say, well, it's an industry ship. I've always thought that Drake are a classic industry company. I know people push for matey, but they're not specifically pirate ships. They're used by pirates because they're cheap and serviceable. That's it.
No, agreed. All right. Getting back on topic, Haze, where we're up to next?
We're the thing is that these missing link ships that sort of jump across the divide. These ships starting from in between the starter and the endgame capital. These are the ships that are going to be the most popular. They're going to be the bread and butter that people are going to always want. They're going to be the mainstay ships that people want to play because they meet the right sort of balance of people and manpower and the best returns for small groups or even as individuals that they can use. And not to mention that is now the stepping stone for them to get to the more complicated capital class industry focused ships. So people are probably either because they want to play by themselves or want to play in smaller groups without having to, get an 8-man team on these huge capitals. These are going to be the ships people want to play the most. In fact, I think these are the ships people want to buy the most. I can see people saying an Orion is too much for me as an individual. Maybe I want something that's more manageable.
In the middle is almost always the best place to be. You get the best of both worlds. So I see a middle ship being possibly able to be piloted solo, but also you can still pilot with other friends. So you get that mix of both. And yes, you can go out and do a really big, using the mining example, you could go out and do a really large mine, but it takes longer. But also you can go and do it on your own. So they're going to be more flexible than, you imagine trying to go out in Orion and do it on your own. Yeah, you could possibly do it, but it'll be a huge feat, and it'd be long and arduous, and you bring a lot back, but it might take you the whole day to do it on your own. Where with a Prospector, obviously, you can only do it on your own. So they all have their weaknesses and strengths, but I actually honestly think, and I think you guys will agree, the minimum of the road in almost everything in life is the most balanced, and that's why they're going to probably be the most popular and sell the most.
And if you think of MMOs, like most MMOs will have your single player play, they'll have your group play, and they'll have your raid play.
That's correct.
And it's easier to get your small party of friends to do party missions than it is to get your 30 or 40 group to do that raid.
Most definitely.
So, and if you think of it, the progression in terms of some of these big ships, raid ships, your Polaris, some of those, I imagine a Polaris is starting to get there. But
in most MSOs, the majority of the players are more casualized, and sort of make the middle ground. And the raid players are like a top 20% of people that even attempt to do it.
Yeah, I agree with both of you wholeheartedly. The more points you bring up, the more it really does point towards that these glaringly obviously missing ships are going to be the most popular, and it's again comes back to what I've said a few times, is it's going to come down to funding. I think they secretly know that these are the ships that everyone really wants, and the longer they hold them off, the more money they're going to make, because they can increase the prices on them, and basically people will buy them. And I think that's another factor too, and I know it's in the show notes somewhere here.
Well, these are going to be really popular ships. These are going to sell. This is like take my money, I just want this ship. And CIG have a huge amount of potential for funding from these ships. And like I said, I think, like you say, I think they know that.
Yeah. And I know you had it here somewhere in the notes and I've lost it, but where we were talking about when they finally go to sell these ships, they've kind of pegged themselves into a really weird spot where, let's say we take the Crucible as an example, and they made another mid-range repair ship that started out at $350. I wouldn't be surprised now if that medium or the in the middle gap ship comes in and it's $300, because eventually that Crucible will be worth $700 or $500 or whatever. But that.
I think you're right. Like the value of these ships, due to the new ship sort of tax, the new ships are more expensive. And then you've got larger capitals in the $350 range, but they're probably going to flog these ships for $300. And yet they're like maybe a third of the size, but they're still going to be popular enough that they're going to sell like hotcakes.
That's another.
Well, and I think the other thing with the new ships.
Sorry, just before you go into that. You just gave me a really important point. We all know the prices of the ships have been increasing as they go along. So maybe they're waiting to. So say they the Crucible gets finished, and then they announce the middle version of it, and the Crucible say it is $500. Then they'll be very comfortably be able to say this medium ship is now $350, which was the old price of what the Crucible used to be.
Yeah, they could do the old 100 ice switcheroo.
Yes, very much.
But the other thing I was going to say is that in terms of groups, there are people in Star Citizen in the community at the moment who buy everything that comes along because they're insane or stupid or have more money than sense or any other reason. But in terms of that group play, there's a lot of people who will buy the ships in view of groups, and there's going to be a whole pile. I reckon there's a whole pile of people out there who are waiting for that mid-core ship that's going to suit their party, suit what they want to do, and they're
They
just
can
waiting
take
for it to
their
come.
close friends out together. That's what they want. They're not thinking of like, I'm in an org and I want to play with lots of people. They're thinking, I want to bring my 3 or 4 friends with me. You know.
I come across lots of little orgs all the time who join SCA, and they say, "Oh, yeah, we're in an org. It's just me and my mates. We just want, we just want to be able to do stuff as a group."
The 2 ships I've held on to, and I struggle to sell or upgrade, is the Caterpillar and the Constellation, because they are the only ships in that group at the moment.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yep.
People hold on to their constellations because they want to play with 2 or 3 friends, and
It's
that's the only ship.
And the other thing is they're
Freelancer.
both all rounders. Yeah, the Freelancers is probably another one. Not quite so much, but what I'm trying to say is that they're both jack of all trades.
They're all in that jack of all trades. The 3 or 4 people, and that's where that almost seems to be the sweet spot.
How
Now,
many
I'm gonna
people
say,
would sell
guys-
their Freelancer and their Cutlass and their Constellation if they get a pure mining ship that's 100 meters or like 60 meters like Constellation?
Yeah.
Well,
You know,
with 4 or 5 people, or 3 or 4 people, right? Probably.
Yeah.
Okay,
And-
guys, I'm going to ask you for closing comments.
Yep.
So, where do you think? So,
I'd
do
like to say
our last
something.
points and closing comments.
The lack of these individual medium jump point progression ships, these medium 30, 60, 90, 100 meter ships, the fact that we don't have them and it's going to take time for them to put these concepts out shows how far we are away from full release, because you cannot go to full release. Oh, we lost Algared.
I clicked the button. Sorry.
QQ.
That was my fault.
We cannot go to a full release in the PU until we have these skip hops and jumps that we need in order to streamline player progression.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying.
Execute.
Yeah, I kind of wholeheartedly agree. There's definitely some glaring gaps, and this medium hop or medium skipping stone really needs to be in place before the game can launch. And I think they know that, and I think that it's definitely something people are kind of, when they figure it out, are not going to be super happy about it. But I think they're going to understand why it was done. And one interesting thing I've seen in game development before is you work out the extremes of where you want to go, and then you fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how they've come at
That's
it.
definitely what they've been doing now.
So don't hate them for it. But I think it. One part I would like to add is I think it also shows how far away the game actually is. If these ships are not actually concepted yet, and if these ships are not even been announced, think of how long it takes them to announce a ship, model a ship, and release a ship. Until we actually start seeing these ships, I think that they are at least, at minimum, 12 months away from releasing the game. At least.
I'd go so far as 18 months.
Yeah, I'd go. You could go further. You could go further, but then there's ships like the Hammerhead where they started that in production way before they sold it. I would almost even speculate they might even have ships in the works right now that they'll announce this year or whenever they announce them, that they know they have to create. They just don't want to put them up for sale because they know that they're going to be super popular.
Well, look, classic point. I know people who have been on tours, right? Office tours, and they've come back and said the 300 is getting reworked. I've seen images of the 300 rework. That was 12 months ago.
Yeah.
And we've only just been told about it. Now, I actually reckon, or I actually think, we've gone through where we think the big holes are. In our next episode, we're actually going to look at where we think possible holes are and also speculate on what ships could be used in other ships as well. And I'm doing that, guys, because we're right on the wire. So
we're also gonna it's gonna be a theory crafting episode. It's the idea that we're gonna be putting solutions and ideas forward, how we can bridge this gap, how we can
total speculation as well. Total theory crafting, total speculation, what we think could be repurposed. Yeah, look forward to it. On that note, I was Al.
I'm Execute, and this is
Haze, and we'll catch you next episode in part 2.
Bye.
Take care.